Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It's great to be here. And I'm very excited today to introduce one of my favorite authors. He's a lot of fun. He is incredibly good as far as writing mysteries and thrillers. And he's written over 18 books. He's a bestseller. Joseph Badal, thank you and welcome to Get to Know.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Doug. It's great to be with you guys this morning.
You know, I don't know if you've seen any of our interviews, but I like to start off talking about your childhood. And
I warned you.
I did warn you. I would like to know if there was anything about your childhood that you think led you to becoming a writer. Like, were you an introverted child, an extroverted child? Did you read a lot? Did you have imaginary friends? Tell us about growing up.
Yeah, that's the first time I've been asked about my childhood, and storytelling was kind of part of our families growing up, and I was the oldest of five children, and as far back as I could remember, our parents would put us in their bed every night. And, five of us looked like sardines in a can. And every night, the hero or the heroine of the story would be one of us children.
Oh, wow.
And Dad and Mom would tell these stories. And of course, we would be so engaged, and we just loved it, especially the nights that we were, the star of the show, so to speak. And then another thing that they did was we would sit around the dinner table at nighttime, and they would pass the story on. Each of us had 1 minute, and somebody would start a story and then would pass it on to the next person at the table, and you'd have 1 minute to continue the story. And of course, it never wound up where it started. And it always amazed me how fertile the imaginations were of even a 3 or 4 year old kid. And we did the same thing with our sons. They've done it, and we've continued to do it with their children. And so there's a tradition in the family of storytelling, and that made me fall in love with stories. And I would go to the public library and carry as many books as I could physically carry home and read them in a week and go back and replenish my stock. So yeah, I think the way I was raised, growing up, was all about storytelling, and it really instilled in me the need to tell stories, not just the desire to read stories.
I absolutely love that. What a great idea. I have a little grandson and a granddaughter on the way, and I think I'm going to have to start this tradition. That's just a fantastic tradition.
It's amazing, and what a great immersion in storytelling at such a young age. That is so creative and wow. I've never heard that before. It's wonderful.
It's what a great family time.
Yeah.
So, when you were growing up, were you an outgoing kid? Were you athletic? Were you, did you keep to yourself? Did you play alone, play with a lot of friends?
No, I was very outgoing, to the point I recall my first grade report card, where my first grade teacher, Mrs. Bernheimer, said to me that Joe's a wonderful student. I just wish I didn't have to compete with him for the class's attention. So that created a little bit of angst at our dinner table that night.
Boy, that brings back memories. How many do I remember about that? I did okay academically, but behavior needs improvement was always there.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That is fantastic.
Very outgoing, athletic, played on a lot of teams and sports teams. And so I had two younger brothers, and they stayed at home and played with toy soldiers. And and every once in a while they'd let me play with them, but they kicked me out because I didn't make the right sounds when I shot guns and stuff like that. Or I'd say, hey, he's dead. I shot him. Now you missed him. It ricocheted or something like that.
Well, did you come from a military family? I know you had quite a military career. How did you end up taking that path?
No, I did not. My father was an immigrant, and so it was instilled in all of us to from the time I can remember. Again, Dad would say, "This is the greatest country on earth, and you all need to pay the country back for what the opportunity it's given you," and that's why I went into the service.
Well,
Cool.
thank you very, very much for your
Yes,
service.
yes.
I mean, that's fantastic. Yeah, you have
Well,
quite a
well, you
career.
escaped there and then got into banking and financing and all of that, the business world for a long time.
Yeah, I
Uh,
did. I actually had an undergraduate and graduate degree in finance, and wound up getting into banking. It's kind of interesting, despite all the storytelling growing up. When I was a junior in high school, my father said, "Well, what do you want to study?" And I said, "I want to be a writer." And I'll never forget this. He said, quote unquote, "Dummy, you have no life experiences to write about that anybody would want to read about." So, so I said, "Well, I could always write about living in a household with an emotionally abusive father." And at that point, I used to sit right next to on my father's left. And at that point, the emotional abuse became physical. So I said, "Well, Dad, what do you want me to be?" And he says, "You should be a banker." So
There you go.
Well, when did you decide? Okay, I grew up telling all these stories and being part of all these stories. When did you decide I am going to take a shot at writing this story, and what steps did you take in the beginning to
I,
become a writer?
I remember that decision almost to the day. We had moved out of the city and moved to the mountains, and now all of a sudden, and kids were gone, and no movie theaters and no restaurants handy, and I'd been wanting to do something for a long time, and it was 1999, and I was 55 years old, and I just said, "I'm going to sit down and do this," and candidly, having a computer versus writing longhand simplified things dramatically, and I started writing, and I really wrote with no intent to get published. Didn't have a clue about the process, and just started writing, and it was a couple of years after that I had finished my first manuscript, and it was a mess. And I had the good fortune of being introduced by a good friend of mine, Steve Brewer, who's a prolific writer, and
Yes.
Steve introduced me to a fellow that edited my work, and he took the first manuscript, which was 390 pages, and it became 268 pages, and it was like killing your baby. I mean, I was almost in tears watching all these pages disappear, and but he was terrific. And then I had a mutual friend that said, "You ought to. I know Tony Hillerman. You ought to send your manuscript to Tony." I said, "Oh, Tony Hillerman's not going to take the time to read my manuscript." But anyway, I wound up doing it, and 6 weeks later, I got an email from him, and he said, "I'm on page 68. I absolutely love it." And he wrote me a blurb, and actually introduced me to my first agent. So
Wow.
what a gentleman.
Well, you won the Hillerman Award a couple of times, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, and several others from military writers and things like that. That quite a few awards, and that's very good.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What's your process? I mean, are you a pantser? Or are you an outliner? I mean, how do you approach a new story?
Oh, Doug, if I had to outline, I'd never write again.
Me too. Yeah.
I start with a premise.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the classes I'm going to do for Outlier University is
Right.
talk about what inspires me to, how do you get started with writing? But I start with that premise. I start with a main character and usually with an antagonist. And from that point on, I have no idea where I'm going. So as an example, my wife and I traveled to France and Ireland in 2022, and I thought, it'd be a really good place to write a book about, or place a story, um, that's where the idea came from. And the next thing I know, I've got a book called The Reunion, and it's placed in France and Ireland. So,
Wow.
Very cool. Very, very cool. I mean, isn't it fun as writers? I mean, I usually know what the premise is and then I go to the place to do the research, but interesting that it inspired you by just being there, in the reverse, quite frankly.
yeah, and I think one of the really wonderful qualities that a writer needs to have is a desire to share his or her experiences with the reader. And so I think there's a generosity of spirit that most writers have to have, despite the fact that a lot of writers would be just as happy in a room with no doors, no windows, and no people.
And just our imaginary friends.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
exactly right. But it's but again, I think a good writer needs to want to share his or her experiences and stories with other people.
Yeah, don't you think also, I mean, I think of writers as thought leaders, and it doesn't matter to me whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, history, current day, we're still framing the world around us and how we see things and trying to make sense of humanity and why things happen, etc. I think that, it's just done in a more subtle, hopefully, if you're a good writer, a more subtle way where we're helping ourselves and others understand the world.
That's absolutely correct. I agree with that.
Yeah, I just think that,
Now you have several series, right? That
I
you've
do.
done. And the Curtis Chronicles is one of them. And I think you have something new coming in that series. Is that correct?
Yes, I have 3 series. The Curtis Chronicles, the 4th book in that series will be out this early summer, and it's called Solace. And we were talking before about what inspires you and where do you start? In the case of Solace, I have been so horrified by the whole subject of human trafficking that and it's interesting. I talked to my publisher maybe 6 or 7 years ago about doing a book about trafficking, and at the time, the feeling was that it would alienate my readers because it was so gritty and so rough a topic. And now it's in the news every day. And
right.
So anyway, Solace is about trafficking, and I did something that I've only done once before, and that was with my book Terror Cell, and I put a foreword in my work of fiction and talked a little bit about the trafficking business and the the money involved in the business and the terror associated with it. And so anyway, the 4th book in the Curtis Chronicles is Solace. I've also got 2 other series. One is the Danforth Saga, which I've just finished the 8th book in that series, and that's The Reunion I mentioned before. That series started with Evil Deeds, which was loosely based on the actual kidnapping of our 2.5-year-old son when I was stationed with the U.S. Army in Greece.
Oh my gosh. Your son was actually kidnapped.
He was. And
how long was he gone and how did you retrieve him?
It was very short because the hero of that story Although, if you get the child back right away, you have no story. So in actuality, we got the boy back almost immediately because of a dog that had adopted us 30 days before, who attacked the kidnapper outside the house. And
Oh my gosh.
and then so anyway, I've got that's the second series that I've done, and that's been a lot of fun. The only mistake I made with that series was I had the characters age chronologically with the years that have gone by since I started book one. So now my hero is instead of leaping tall fences, he's now falling over them,
That's always a problem.
And you've got the Lassiter Martinez series as well.
That's right. And the first book in that series, Borderline, was the first book I have ever done where the main characters, the protagonists, were female. Now, in all of my books, I always have a strong female character. It always drives me nuts when the females are depicted as these frail, insecure figures that have to be rescued by a man. You ever notice in a movie that if a woman is running away, she always twists her ankle and falls down and is caught?
Yeah.
Men never twist their ankles. But I was raised in a household with a very strong mother. I have a very strong spouse, and I felt it was a disservice to show women as victims all the time. But in any case, I decided I was going to do something different, and so I started the series with two female detectives, and I've had such positive feedback that the fourth book in that series just came out in 2022, and I just really love writing that. That's
cool.
That's very fun. And you also write standalones. Which do you find, and maybe they're equal, but do you find it easier to write a series book or a standalone, or is it the same challenges?
I think mostly the same challenges, although one of the nice things about a series is that I think it's not just me, it's people that write series tend to allow their characters to grow as time goes by through the series.
Mm-hmm.
But in a standalone, you take let's say a flawed protagonist, but then what you've got to do is you've got to have that personal development happen within one book instead of over a series of books. My publisher once said to me, and she's encouraged me to go ahead and write standalones because, as she put it, quote, "it cleans your literary palette," end quote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Get your head out of the series for a while and out of those characters. And I think some of my best stories actually have been standalone.
So what are you working on now?
Well, I finished editing the eighth in the Danforth saga just recently. The fourth in the Curtis Chronicles, as I mentioned, will be out this June or July, and I am writing a standalone. Well, I'm not sure if it's going to be a standalone or it's going to be the fifth in the Lassiter Martinez case file series at this point, but it's a thriller that is placed primarily in New Mexico.
Oh,
Cool.
okay.
Well, let's take a little sidestep and tell us about this.
Oh, Holes in Our Hearts. Yeah. Thanks to Jim Tritton, who is a member of Military Writers and Southwest Writers and so forth, I helped edit this anthology of just a very eclectic set of genre stories, everything from poetry to fiction, nonfiction, mystery, thriller, and so forth. And the only common denominator was that you had to either be a veteran, current serving in the military, or a relative of a veteran, and and you had to be from New Mexico. So I helped edit this anthology, and this cover that you're showing is a cover of the anthology, and it's based on, the title is based on a sculpture garden at the Veterans Memorial Park in Albuquerque, and that's part of this. And you can see that particularly in that first stone is that there are holes in it, and thus the name of the anthology, Holes in Our Hearts.
Wow.
That is so good. That is so cool. Didn't it win some kind of award recently? Wasn't it awarded something?
The New Mexico Press Women
Yeah.
Association awarded it first prize for editing.
Cool.
Well, congratulations on that. That's fantastic.
And I have to point out that Joe, as we've already said, is part of our Outliers team, and he's one of the early members. He's the guy that we wanted on board, and he hopped on board, thank goodness, very early on, and has always been part of this, and we appreciate it. And he, as a class coming up, I think it's April 29th on Sources of Inspiration for Writers. And that'll be on a Monday night, April 29th, and it'll be a Zoom class. That's all on the website and all that. So go there and sign up and join Joe, because it's going to be a fun talk. And we're really looking forward to it and appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Joe, thank you so much for being with us. You are fantastic. We need to have you back on when your book is coming out in June, July. Keep us posted on, when that'll be happening. We'd love to get you back on.
That's great. I always love talking about myself.
No, we love hearing it.
That goes back to grammar school, right?
Yeah. Joseph Badal, thank you so much. Back to you, Doug. Anything else?
Thank you. And we appreciate everybody for watching us. Remember, go down and click that thumbs up that lets us know you like us, because we like to be liked. And join us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you won't miss these great interviews. And this has been Get to Know with our friend Joe Badal here on the Outliers YouTube channel. So until next time, and then we will be back with you with other interviews.
Thank you.